Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this August 6, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story tonight, thousands of people in Japan have paused and lowered their heads and stood in silence to remember one of the most shocking attacks the world has ever witnessed. At that exact moment, 70 years ago today, an atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Hiroshima by the United States, killing at least 14,000 people. At a remembrance ceremony, the Japanese Prime Minister made a new appeal for the world to rid itself of nuclear weapons. Fergal Keane reports.
This place evokes one of humanity's most fearful moments. I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The words quoted in awe by the scientist at the heart of the project which destroyed Hiroshima. Today, Buddhist monks gathered early to pray for peace at the epicenter of the explosion. At the city's memorial park, an offering of water for those who perished in the flames. The living reached out to the dead. And at exactly 8:15, the moment the bomb exploded, the tolling of a solitary bell. Then, the symbolic release of doves. Japan's Prime Minister used the occasion to call for the scrapping of all nuclear weapons.
We have to continue our effort to achieve the world without nuclear weapons. And it is our responsibility, and it is our duty.
But the Prime Minister is a divisive figure in Japan. A block away, these anti-war protesters fear Japan is following a dangerous path in the face of growing regional tensions. The government wants to change the country's pacifist constitution to allow troops to be sent abroad to fight.
We want to stop Japan for becoming to be able to do war again.
Are you worried that it might happen?
I have a strong feeling that Abe Prime Minister is going to do that.
70 years after the bombing, there's no hatred of America in Hiroshima. In fact, we encountered an extraordinary story of reconciliation.
U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy airmen interned as POWs at...
Ralph Neal's uncle and namesake was a prisoner of war in a jail on this site and was killed by the bomb. He and 11 other POWs are commemorated on this plaque, thanks to a campaign by atom bomb survivor Shigeaki Mori. I've been waiting for Mr. Neal to visit, he says. It's been lonely doing this work on my own. Everybody talks about peace. But doing this is what peace is about.
May I give you a hug? Thank you so much. Thank you.
The remembrance ceremonies continued into the evening. Each of these lanterns contains an individual message from a citizen of Hiroshima for the souls of the dead. 70 years after the bombing, the spirit of Hiroshima is both a warning and an appeal for peace. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Hiroshima.
Friends, and there's one thing we have often told you on this program, that God has a way to peace, and if you follow it, it's a guaranteed peace. And it's real simple. when you look at it on paper. Now, when you try to do it as a human being, it may not always be that easy for everyone, but you got to have a mindset to it and willpower. And even those who do will sometimes trip up and fail, but God, in His great mercy, allows continued repentance as long as a person has repented and it's their intent to walk in His way. And the guarantee of peace comes down to what God says in basically, well, the whole Bible, but basically 2 chapters summarize it pretty well. A couple of chapters we've referred to as the blessing and cursing chapters. They're found in Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, where God starts out in each chapter by saying, essentially, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Eternal and obey my commands, my judgments, my statutes, then voila, wonderful blessings to you. And He enumerates and names them, including verse 4 of Leviticus 26, rain in due season, meaning no drought, no floods, proper amount of rain exactly. And other blessings, too, that are both individual, like the rain in due season will bless somebody's fruit trees in your backyard if you're obeying God. Other blessings, though, are collective for a nation. For example, I'll make you the head, not the tail, as a nation. If the majority of the people in the nation are obeying your Creator God. He says that regarding your enemies, 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. And other blessing after blessing He mentions if you're obeying your Creator God. But then on the other hand, He says, if you don't obey, then just the opposite. Cursings. And those cursings are usually just exactly the opposite. Instead of the head, I'll make you the tail. Instead of being the lender, your nation will wind up being a great borrower. Instead of your nation, your soldiers chasing your enemies will be chasing you, and I'll break the pride of your power. And on it goes. Those are good chapters to read, and something that should encourage everyone to say, hey, let's stop fighting our Creator. Let's obey Him and receive the blessings of the great God who can put our enemies on the run for us. That would be wise indeed. Well, friends, let's go on. Our next story, we got several stories tonight. There's been a steep increase. But before I tell you about the story, let me just mention, for those of you in the United States, in the UK, they call what we call truck drivers of 18-wheelers, they call them lorry drivers. Now, you're probably learning that from these stories that involve England and Calais every night. And in this story, it tells us there's been a sharp increase in the number of fines issued to lorry drivers, truck drivers, big rig truck drivers, 18-wheelers and so on, for carrying illegal migrants. In the UK, in the year to April, 3,300 fines were issued, an increase of 50% on the year before. Angus Crawford reports.
Desperate and determined, day after day, migrants in Calais target lorries as their best hope of getting into the UK. Truckers have to be on constant alert for stowaways.
What they're doing, them getting underneath and them actually tying themselves to the chassis.
Jason Burkett says they're getting more resourceful and at times threatening.
They started throwing bricks at the front of at your windscreen. So you obviously if they crack your windscreen, you've got to stop, and once you've stopped, they're physically trying to get into the front of your wagon and intimidating you and saying, let me in, let me in, let me in.
Drivers and companies can be given £2,000 on-the-spot fines for every stowaway. New figures show the numbers of fines have gone up to 3,319, up by 50% in a year. Almost 6,500 migrants have been found hidden in lorries, although the true figure is likely to be much higher. But haulage companies say they're being unfairly treated. This firm's paid out more than £40,000 in fines and legal fees over the last year and a half.
We're accredited by the Border Force and doing everything that they're asking us to do. So, why should we be fined or penalised for working alongside the government? We should be working as one.
The government's spending millions of pounds to try and combat the problem, with a new secure area in Calais for more than 200 lorries. In a statement, the Home Office said, most hauliers take their responsibility for vehicle security seriously, but despite cooperation from the British haulage industry, Border Force estimates 1/3 of lorries arriving at the UK border do not have basic standards of security. While hauliers and government argue, the fines mount up and the migrants keep coming. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
Friends, it's not always so wonderful for the migrants. Sometimes their ships at sea capsize, as in this story tonight, which says hopes fade for migrants after boat collapses in Mediterranean.
The moment migrants were plucked from the Mediterranean, the Irish Navy, Italian forces and several aid agencies worked together to save more than 360 men, women and children. But concerns remain for hundreds more.
Our fears in such an incident is that we don't know how many people might be trapped within the belly of the boat that capsized and sunk.
This disaster happened some 15 miles off the Libyan coast. An estimated 600 people crammed into a smuggler's fishing boat meant for 50, which sank in rough seas. Some were rescued by the Irish Navy vessel, the Ellie Neve. It was among the first on the scene.
The boat sank in less than 2 minutes. So there was a very, very difficult rescue operation. And the 367 migrants were successfully rescued and taken on board the Ellie Neve. We also know, unfortunately, that there are 25 bodies on board, one of them a child, that drowned.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says such tragedies are happening all too often.
No one should have to die trying to reach safety in Europe. It is unconscionable that people have to take these treacherous journeys. The vast majority of people arriving to Europe across the Mediterranean, and there have been 200,000 this year, are people who are fleeing war and conflict and persecution. It is risky, the journeys they're taking. They've already risked their lives to escape the wars, and now they're risking their lives again because they're fleeing desperation.
So far this year, more than 2,000 people have died in their attempts to reach Europe by boat. Nick Qureshi, BBC News.
The Deputy Mayor of Calais, Mignonet,
Ladies and gentlemen,
has blamed the UK for the migrant crisis in Calais. He said 99% of migrants said they wanted to go to England.
Deputy Mayor, why are you in France blaming Britain for the current migrant crisis at the Eurotunnel, the railway link between Britain and France?
Well, we blame England. We mainly blame the policy of England about immigration, wherever it's on the port on Eurotunnel. The problem is that we know, and you as media probably interviewed already a lot of migrants, and 99% of them are saying they want to go to England. Why? Because of the benefits. They know that they will be able to work on the black market easily. Why can they work on the black market easily? Because there are no controls. And we have the feeling that nothing is done to fight against illegal workers in England. And on top of that, we have the feeling that England is always blaming Calais or the Schengen space for that situation. Calais is not the magnet. Whatever we do, even if we give kind of facilities, we provide kind of facilities, or if we don't, they still come to Calais because the only target they have is to reach England, whether it's on the port, whether it's on the tunnel.
Okay, how it relates to Bible prophecy, understanding the end time events
England
leading
and France,
to the
though, are not the
peaceful
only
world tomorrow.
European countries that are having a problem.
Ladies and gentlemen,
with the
Stephen Lloyd Gilbert.
migration situation from those trying to escape via the Mediterranean. There's been a sharp rise in the number of migrants trying to enter Hungary. The government there has said that more than 1,500 illegal migrants enter the country every day. Every day. In response to this, Hungarian authorities have built a 4-meter, 13-foot fence stretching the 175 kilometers, 109 miles of the Hungary-Serbian border. The BBC's Nick Thorpe reports.
The race is on to get Hungary's border fence ready by the end of the month. It's being built by prison inmates at this steelworks at Dunaújváros in central Hungary and put in place by soldiers and the unemployed. It's a radical answer to what the Hungarian government says is an intolerable situation.
The nature and the number of illegal migrants entering the European Union is unwanted by all the European countries. Nobody is prepared for the integration, for the incorporation of 1 million people that is going to reach, according to the estimates, this year.
This fence is something of an experiment for the Hungarian government. First they said it would be ready by the end of November, now by the end of August. But it's designed to send a message to the tens or hundreds of thousands of people on their way up through the Balkans to Hungary. Stay away, you're not welcome here. 38,000 people entered the EU through Hungary last month alone. Rumours that a new barrier will soon block their path have probably increased their numbers. On arrival, they're rounded up by police and taken to this registration camp near the border.
So you come from Ghana?
Yes.
How difficult was the journey?
It's very bad. Very bad. Very bad with a pregnant woman, with the children.
How old are your children?
2 and 4.
While the Hungarian government sometimes gives the impression that Hungary is a country opposed to all asylum seekers, many dozens of volunteers here in Szeged, close to the Serbian border, and elsewhere in the country, are out to give a different impression.
The majority are from either Afghanistan, Syria, of course, Iraq, and a lot of also from Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Across the border, the Serbian authorities have largely turned a blind eye to all the people travelling through their country. At best, they point them the way to Hungary.
We are Syrian, from Syria, from Damascus or Aleppo. We are going to Europe, to Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, to Sweden, to find a better life.
The Hungarian government is building the fence now. Will that stop you if there's a fence in the way?
That will be hard to us, but I think when we looking for life, nothing will stop us.
All right, friends, and that migration problem in Europe may well be one of the things that helps to push Europe into redefining itself into 5 kings or regional or national leaders from the east and 5 from the west who will give their power to one dictate, one emperor. The Bible calls one beast, the 7th and final head of the Holy Roman Empire. So we're paying attention to that, and it's a big problem for the European nations involved, and a big one, as you just heard, for Hungary. Egypt is in the news today. Egypt has just completed a multi-billion-dollar upgrade of the strategic Suez Canal. But why is this relatively poor country spending so much money on this Suez Canal project? And what role has the canal played in forming Egypt's national identity? The BBC's Mohammed Mahdi explains in this BBC special 60-second video. Now, for those of you who are watching or listening via podcast, I will do my best to read the subtitles as this video rolls. Why the Suez Canal matters in 60 seconds. The Suez Canal was completed in 1869. The strategic canal was under British control from 1875. Until the Arab nationalist Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized it in 1956. So it was under British control from 1875 until 1956, sparking a failed British, Israeli, and French invasion, and making Nasser and the canal symbols of national pride. Fast forward to 2015, and there's a new strongman in power. President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, who ousted his predecessor Mohamed Morsi and promised to revive Egypt's struggling economy. He's become the face of a huge $8.5 billion expansion of the Suez Canal. And that's it for that special video from the BBC. Our last story for tonight, friends, that we have video for at least, involves war and rumors of war. The second seal from Revelation. A rebel group trained by the United States to fight in Syria has told the BBC they are being let down by the Americans. They claim U.S. military support failed to materialize in one battle, which left at least 5 dead and 12 captured, including their commander. The BBC's international correspondent, Ihan Pennell, reports.
He wanted a moderate rebel force that could take the fight to Islamic State and, crucially, hold territory. More than 5,000 were supposed to be trained in Jordan and in secret camps here in Turkey. But almost immediately, the plans started to fall apart. Only 60 have actually finished training. And when they were deployed across the border not far from here, what happened to them was nothing short of disastrous.
America's new plan rolled into action a few weeks ago when the men from the 30th Division, fresh out of US training, crossed into Syria, shaky at best. Now, Captain Al-Wawi has decided to speak out to the BBC. He's an officer with the 30th Division, and he's watched in horror at what's happened to his men.
In reality, we've got no international guarantees to provide cover for our fighters or to protect the 30th Division.
And yet the Americans have announced very clearly that they will provide air support to the 30th and to other groups.
You know what happened to us? We told those responsible 10 hours beforehand that the Nusra Front were going to attack us. But it was 2 hours after the fighting started that the coalition bombed Nusra. And they didn't support us during the fighting.
But the Pentagon's told us it thinks the battle was actually quite successful. A spokesman also said the training program will be turning out more fighters. Meanwhile, Islamic State has yet to feel any threat from America's new force in Syria.
هل يعقل لشذاذ الآفاق تنظيم داعش How come Daesh is created in less than 12 months, fights the entire world in Iraq and Syria, and occupies half of those countries without international support? And this plan, that's backed by many countries, trains just 54 fighters in 6 months.
As Syria's war gets ever more complex, so the conflict only grows. Millions uprooted, hundreds of thousands dead, and still no end, no solution. Ian Pannell, BBC News, on the Turkey-Syria border.
For instance, we're finishing a little bit early. I said that'd be our last video, but I have some video from NASA I think you'll find interesting, especially in light of what occurred just a few days ago with the blue moon, which in the case of the current blue moon, there's more than two types of blue moon, but the simple one and the one that recently occurred is when a full moon occurs twice within a pagan Roman calendar month. Now, if you're going by the Hebrew calendar, you won't have that situation, but on the pagan Roman calendar, you do. But here's some video from today's news, produced by the BBC, that shows NASA's Deep Space Observatory after they released unusual images of what is commonly referred to as the dark side of the moon. The far side of the moon is never visible from Earth, and these pictures show the moon as it passes over a sunlit Earth. One NASA scientist said it was surprising how much brighter Earth is than the moon.
Now, for a unique view of the dark side of the moon, NASA's Deep Space Observatory satellites captured these composite images of the moon from 1 million miles away. The far side of the moon is never visible from Earth. It's seen here as it passes over the Pacific near North America. Well, one NASA scientist said it's surprising how much brighter Earth is than the moon.
Okay, and friends, I just looked over a couple of things that just came in that I'm going to mention as we close tonight. I don't have video on this, but we had a lot of stories at the beginning of tonight's news regarding the migration problem in Europe, especially between England and France. England, the Eurotunnel from Calais, France to England. One migrant was captured who tried to walk to England through the Channel Tunnel. The Channel Tunnel is a little more than 30 miles long. He got most of the way in there, but they captured him just a couple of miles short of the entrance to England side of that Channel Tunnel. And then another story just in, from Russia. Russia destroys tons of foreign food imports because of in retaliation to the sanctions that the EU and the United States issued against Russia. We'll probably have more on that in the days ahead. That's it for this Thursday night, friends. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back with more news between now and Sunday night. We're not on Friday or Saturday night. I am on another channel that I host on Saturday morning, for those of you that know about that. Otherwise, that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining me on this Thursday evening. Until next time, friends, your host for Nightcast, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long. And I better switch my video bank so I don't do what I did last night and wind up just sitting here like a dummy after I say goodnight to you. All right, until next time, friends, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.